This is a podcast from BFM 89.9, the business station.
Good afternoon and welcome to Enterprise Biz Bites. My name is Rich Bradbury. It is Thursday, the 15th of September, 2022, 12:05, coming up to 12:06 here in the studio. Outside of the studio, I am joined by...
Christine Wong.
Oh, thank you. I was so worried that we couldn't hear you. How are you, Chris?
No, I'm good. This is not our first virtual rodeo.
No,
so
I know, but I panic a little bit when it comes to technology and things.
The paranoia.
Yes. If you want to get in touch with today's show, you can get us via WhatsApp. 018-789-8899 is the WhatsApp number. And of course, you can get us also on Twitter. We are at BFM Radio. So today, it is a tale of OPR hikes and business impacts. You might have heard Sim a little bit talking about OPR hikes, and that was this morning on Ringgit and Cents, and I believe they was discussing it as well yesterday. And after 3 consecutive OPR hikes in a matter of 4 months, has our inflationary pressures really decreased? We've discussed how inflation impacts the business environment, but there also needs to be a look into how rising overnight policy rates can affect businesses, and in particular SMEs and MSMEs. To help us understand how the OPR hikes can affect Malaysian businesses, we'll be hearing from Carmelo Ferlito, the CEO for the Centre for Market Education. So Malaysia recorded a growth of 8.9% in GDP during the second quarter of the year, and these are some of the highest rates recorded in the region. Malaysia's economy as a whole grew nearly 7% for the first 6 months of 2022. But despite these positive figures, SMEs and businesses throughout the country are still finding it a challenge as sales continue to be lukewarm, even as pandemic restrictions are relaxed. While SMEs involved in industries like food supply and raw goods are doing relatively well in terms of sales, businesses focused on non-essential products are still struggling. Prices have increased due to operating issues like labor shortages and production costs that have been rising steadily.
Yes, and studies have also shown that consumers are spending less and turning to cheaper alternatives. Some SMEs have voiced concern that the increase in OPR rates has further reduced the spending power of consumers. With lockdowns restricting movement for the greater part of 2 years, many consumers are also more willing to spend on tours and vacations to make up for it, leading many to call this phenomenon revenge travel, a trend that I have yet to partake in. Bank Negara Malaysia has also raised the overnight policy rate 3 times over the course of 4 months. As we said earlier, it was increased in May, July, and September by 25 basis points each, bringing it up to the current level of 2.5%.
So the central bank has defended this move as a bid to control Malaysia's inflation rate by reducing the flow of money into the market. In a statement, it mentioned that despite the continued easing in global supply chain conditions, inflationary pressures have remained high. This is due to factors such as elevated commodity prices and tight labor markets. AmBank Research expects more hikes might be planned, with the OPR hitting ranges of around 3 to 3.25%. And it's been pointed out that raising the OPR does not help reduce operating costs or supply problems for businesses. The hike only serves to reduce the purchasing power of consumers. Mohammed Abdullah from the Federal Territory Malay Hawkers and Petty Traders Association is of the opinion that the increase in OPR will minimally affect small-time hawkers who had little to no loans. He also added, quote, vendors, especially those who sell food and basic goods, will continue to receive customers. Any impact will likely be felt most by those involved in the sale of goods from factories.
Yeah, so at this point, just a quick reminder of how OPR hikes can impact businesses. There are 3 key areas to consider. Number 1 is that loan repayments will increase. If the bank decides to pass the hike on to consumers or businesses, that would mean monthly loan repayments would increase. Also, loan tenure will increase. Should the monthly installment be maintained, it would mean that the repayment period will be extended as the interest rate has increased as well. You've also got potentially tougher loan approvals. The higher the OPR, the higher the cost of borrowing, which will lead to lesser capital financing opportunities as banks will tighten the prerequisite requirements to secure loans.
So Golim Tai, a senior economics lecturer from the University of Malaya, has suggested that the central bank carry out postmortems and fact-finding missions to gauge the success of the recent OPR hikes. He noted the rate hikes would see increases in monthly repayments and other loans. Hence, it is important for the central bank to look into whether these hikes have had the desired effects in reducing inflationary pressures. He also added that policymakers need to go down to the ground. It's not as easy as sitting in front of computers and crunching numbers. Assumption cannot be based on past historical data, as it may not necessarily apply to existing situations which are based on factors such as geopolitical conflicts, supply chain problems, and other issues. And for context, inflation, as measured by the Consumer Price Index, CPI, which increased 2.8% in May, 3.4% in June, and 4.4% in July.
Barjoy Bardai, an economist from University Tun Abdul Razak, disagrees with the OPR hikes as a move to reduce inflation. This is due to Malaysia's reliance on imports, which had, in reality, increased due to our weakening ringgit. The central bank should instead be looking at increasing commercial banks' reserve requirements, meaning banks would have less money to disperse for consumers and business loans. Also, Shankaran Nambiar, a senior research fellow at the Malaysian Institute of Economic Research, echoed the same sentiment that the OPR hike might not have been the best option.
All right. That's what we've got to say. And for business owners out there, how do you feel about the recent OPR hikes? How has it affected your business? How has it been running? And we've got more hikes being forecasted. How have you adjusted your business model to deal with these challenges that may or may not come? Let us know what you think about this via WhatsApp 018-789-8899. We'll be back with, of course, Carmelo Ferlito, the CEO of the Centre for Market Education, to discuss the OPR hikes and the potential impacts on Malaysian businesses. Me and Chris, we're going to take a quick break while we have some music from Deborah Harry. I Want That Man, she says, here on Enterprise Biz Bites on BFM 89.9.
Banish feudal mentality. BFM 89.9. The business station.
Welcome back to Enterprise Biz Bites. It's a tale of OPR hikes and business impacts here on Enterprise Biz Bites. I'm Rich Bradbury. I'm joined via the internet by
Christine Wong.
We're going to be with you for a few more minutes yet, but of course, after 3 consecutive OPR hikes in a matter of 4 months, have our inflationary pressures really decreased? We've discussed how inflation impacts the business environment, but there also needs to be a look into how rising overnight policy rates can affect businesses, and in particular, SMEs and MSMEs. If you want to get in touch with the show, 018-789-8899 is the WhatsApp number to get us at. You can also get us at Twitter, and we are at BFM Radio. Me and Chris have laid out some points for you, of course, but we need to get somebody else's opinion on this. A bit of an expert, Carmelo Ferlito, the CEO at the Centre for Market Education, to discuss these OPR hikes and, their potential impacts on Malaysian businesses. So, Carmelo, to start us off, Malaysia recorded an 8.9% increase in GDP for the second quarter of the year, while the economy grew 6.9% in the first 6 months of 2022. But despite these figures, positive figures, many SMEs out there are still fighting for survival. Can you help us understand the odd disparity here, please?
Yeah, I think that we need to take into account two main factors. First, regarding specifically the numbers. One is that the increase are referring to a certain baseline. So our latest performances look so stellar because we start from a very low baseline from last year. So we were in lockdown, our GDP was decreasing, and was the only country, I think, in Southeast Asia in which the GDP was decreasing in Q2 2021. And therefore, with the recovery coming, it looks more stellar here than elsewhere because our starting point was lower. So this is one point to be taken into account. The second one is that numbers are aggregates. So it's difficult to look into the numbers alone and to understand the reality on the ground. We need a higher level of disaggregation. So these are strictly, let's say, statistical reasons. Another one is that the recovery looks stronger in consumption. So the recovery is still driven by consumption and by export, okay, and adding on also government spending, while SMEs in Malaysia are mostly present in the service sector, so not simply producing goods for consumption. They represent only a limited part of our export, around 11%, and they are part of a bigger supply chain. So the part of the GDP that is struggling still to show strong signs of recovery is the investment part. Hopefully this is going to improve later. But I would say that what the figures alone don't catch is how SMEs are related to investments that are done by bigger companies. And therefore, if these bigger companies don't make investments, that SMEs struggle with the production of the components that are related to that bigger investment. Then we add on the difficulties that they have in sourcing labor, in particular for micro businesses, which represent the great majority of SMEs. And then we probably get more clarity on that discrepancy.
Right. So for some context, how much do Malaysian SMEs contribute to our GDP numbers and economy as a whole?
If we include also MSMEs, so micro and small medium enterprises, they account for around 37% of the GDP. And they employ almost half of the workforce. 47.8% is the latest data from 2021. And they represent the great majority of our enterprises. Okay, so we are around 95% of the number of registered businesses are micro and small medium enterprises. Within this category, almost 80% are micro businesses. So it means that our economy is, the structure of our economy is strongly relying on super micro businesses, often family owned. But obviously, because of their dimension, they contribute only 37% to the GDP, while the rest of the GDP, the rest of 63%, is produced by bigger companies, which represent a small percentage on the total number of companies.
So this has, of course, come amidst 3 consecutive OPR rate hikes, which was taken by the central bank to control Malaysia's inflation rate. Perhaps you can help us understand the decision behind these rate hikes within a span of 4 months. What was the rationale behind that timeline?
Inflationary pressures were there. Actually, we warned as CME about this inflation coming already 1.5 years ago. We started to launch the alarm. So this is only part of the story. The other one is the fact that the economy is expecting to go toward a normalization path. So somehow the crisis, the worst, is considered to be over by the central bank. And therefore, the central bank think that it is now the moment to normalize also the level of interest rate, which by being extremely low in the past contributed to create inflation. Okay, so we don't have to see this move simply as a fight to inflation, but also a sign of expectation of a certain normalization process. At the same time, we can't expect miracles from the interest rate hikes in terms of the fight to inflation. These kind of measures take time in order to produce results, a lot of time, and there is nothing automatic in this. So I'm quite skeptical on the possibility, indeed, of monetary policy to be the main determinant of growth or recession, or to cure recession. At the same time, in fact, I believe that without a more holistic plan of restructuring government spending in order to withdraw money from the system, we will be unable to properly fight price tensions.
Mm-hmm. Could you give us perhaps an overview of how these OPR hikes have affected businesses, particularly our SMEs and MSMEs?
The way in which primarily increases in the interest rate affect businesses on the ground, obviously, is to see the cost of borrowing increasing, but this depends very much on how the banking system reacts to the decisions from the central bank, which can be also differentiated from bank to bank. But obviously, this is the most immediate effect. So if you ask me if this is painful and can be painful, yes, but unfortunately, at the same time, is also necessary.
Okay, hold that thought, Carmelo. We need to take a short break here on BizBytes. Folks, we are talking, of course, about a tale of OPR hikes and business impacts, how the 3 consecutive OPR hikes in a matter of 4 months have our inflationary pressures really decreased. That's what we're discussing today. We're hearing, of course, from our friend Carmelo Ferlito, the CEO at the Center for Market Education. We're discussing the OPR hikes and the potential impacts on Malaysian businesses. Myself and Chris are going to take a short break with some music. It is Third Eye Blind here with Semi-Charmed Life. Here at Enterprise BizBytes, BFM 89.9.
Business-filled minds, BFM 89.9.
Welcome back to Enterprise BizBytes, folks. My name is Rich Bradbury. I'm joined by
Christine Wong.
It's a tale of OPR hikes and business impacts. After 3 consecutive OPR hikes in a matter of 4 months, have our inflationary pressures really decreased? We've discussed how inflation impacts business environment, but we also need to look at, of course, how it impacts SMEs and MSMEs. We've been hearing from Carmelo Ferlito, the CEO over at the Center for Market Education. Here we're discussing OPR hikes and the potential impacts on Malaysian businesses. If you want to get in touch with the show before we wrap up, you can get us via WhatsApp 018-789-8899 or get us on Twitter. We are at BFM Radio. So we had a short break. We finished up with a question about overviews of these hikes and how they have affected SMEs and MSMEs. But Carmelo, there have been calls to grant yet another round of moratoriums to some of these struggling SMEs out there. What do you think of this move? Is it something that you agree with?
I think that the positive thing is that the government is thinking about a way to help enterprises and to help businesses. This is already a positive factor, although I don't believe that the loan moratorium can be the right instrument, the right tool at this moment. We have gone already through few rounds of loan moratorium. I believe that this creates too much uncertainty in the way in which long-term contracts are negotiated. So it creates too much pressure on the creditor side, and this may push even for higher interest rates at the bank side in order to compensate the higher degree of uncertainty. So if we need to go for another loan moratorium, I would say that this should be a decision left to the banking system, to negotiation between banks and customers in order to decide and to see which one are the real situations that need to be helped on the ground. Otherwise, I would prefer to move in the direction of tax deductions.
Mm-hmm. So let's talk about some possible solutions for some of the current challenges that our local businesses face. What are some short to medium-term measures that can be taken to ease the pressure that they're facing?
Mm-hmm.
I believe that fiscal incentives, so the fiscal tool in terms of lowering, in example, the corporate tax for certain group of businesses can be helpful. So restructuring of the corporate tax for small businesses with a threshold to be decided. And the second one is to to push more and more for a liberalization of the labor market at regional level.
Okay. Give us your take on the government's various efforts and initiatives to assist and support local businesses in the last 2 years. How effective do you think they've been as a whole?
The best way to help businesses is to avoid them to close down. And having embraced the belief that lockdowns could have had any positive impact on the fight against COVID without producing higher costs when compared to the benefits, I think has been the biggest mistake that has been done. And unfortunately, it has been universally accepted by the government, the opposition, the businesses. So everybody that accepted that is now responsible for the suffering we are encountering. So I think that the government did deploy measures to try to help both consumers and businesses. But obviously, the damage that was produced by altering the structure of our economy for almost 2 consecutive years has been too big to be possibly addressed with any kind of fiscal measure.
Right. So I guess final question for you, Carmelo. Moving forward with more OPR hikes on the horizon, should there be more engagement with businesses to discuss impacts and the assistance that they would need?
Well, yes, more OPR hikes will come, certainly. I think this is the way in which Malaysia as a system, as an economic system, can rethink about its business organization. The presence, the so strong presence of micro businesses, I think, calls for a reflection about the need of a reorganization. So the possibility for businesses to work more together, because there is a lot of talking, example, in terms of automation, digitalization, and etc. But this kind of technological jumps, in order to happen, need economies of scale, and they do not make sense for micro businesses, which represent the great majority of the businesses in Malaysia. So I think that probably one line of action on which the government could act indeed and take some measure is to create opportunities for businesses to meet each other, to find a way toward consolidation. Obviously, this implies also cultural change. It's not simply an economic measure, and it will take time. But this current moment of struggling probably can be taken as an opportunity to start that epochal change that is probably necessary and not anymore procrastinable at this point.
Okay, thanks ever so much for that. That was Carmelo Ferlito, the CEO at the Center for Market Education, discussing with us the OPR hikes and their potential impacts on Malaysian businesses. But that's pretty much all the time that me and Chris have for today's edition of Enterprise Biz Bites. If you did miss any part of the show, don't forget you can download the podcast wherever you normally get it from. We recommend the BFM app. It's available on the Apple App Store and, of course, on Google Play. Don't go anywhere, because coming up after the 1 o'clock news, it is the Breakfast Grill replay. The 16th of September marks 59 years since the formation of Malaysia. The inclusion of Sabah, Sarawak and Peninsular Malaysia under one national banner has created a rich tapestry of cultural heritage, spanning multiple communities, including generational knowledge in producing crafts and handiworks. Can more be done to promote the economic potential of craftwork and cottage industries to elevate the livelihoods of indigenous and rural communities in the country? This morning, the Breakfast Grill was speaking with Jacqueline Fong, the founder of Tanoti Crafts. That's all coming up after the 1 o'clock news. On behalf of myself and Christine, of course, we'd like to say in advance, Selamat Hari Malaysia for tomorrow. And of course, have yourselves a wonderful long break and a great weekend. This, of course, has been Enterprise Biz Bites here on BFM 89.9, the business station.
You have been listening to a podcast from BFM 89.9, the business station. For more stories of the same kind, download the BFM app.